So we're now in the final stage of this entire journey, and we've gone through, the shortlisting process, the interviewing phase. We've gone through the funding, the appointments, and right now we are at the crux of it, the takeover. Now, this is the process really where a lot of people get things wrong because they don't understand what needs to happen. So there's very, very critical things that should happen. Mark, how do we get this through?
I think a takeover is just incredibly detailed. And we obviously have taken on a track and trace process throughout the sale process that we've been through now and taken you through. And then there's obviously the takeover track and trace. And that is an entire checklist plan, which is going from the 60 days prior to takeover all the way until post-takeover.
Yeah.
And what needs to be in place by when.
Sure.
And I think, Sponello, the key thing within PetroCONNECT now is that we have an operational excellence team and facilitation team. And that team guides the dealer and gets allocated to a dealer that will then, so buyer and seller, being able to take them through the process, have regular check-ins with them throughout this process, to be able to take them through the checklist and assist them with every part of it. I mean, have you been through a takeover where you're having to deal with the speed point machines and making sure the merchants are set up on time?
The worst thing is when the money still goes to the old dealer's account because certain processes were not followed, depending on which oil company it is with. But all those things are very critical. Your debtors, if the site has debtors, for example, have the deposits been...
we send letters out to the debtors. We've done a proper takeover document on takeover, which is obviously fundamental to the takeover. I mean, those are critical things, but I think certainly for a buyer, I mean, you have so much going through your head during that last 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I mean, you've got funding and document signing and etc. You just want to get in, but there's so many things that you're thinking of. And then as a seller, you're obviously just thinking of getting out and moving on. But at the same time, as a seller, you've got a bunch of things that you're thinking of, but a whole lot of things you're not thinking of. And those costs can add up post-takeover because all of a sudden the debit order keeps hitting you.
Yes.
And now that hasn't been cancelled and that debit order hasn't been cancelled and that security company wasn't moved over and the merchant contracts weren't moved over for those speed point devices. And did they move the safes over at the correct times? And was the cash picked up at the right time? And CRT, did they pick up at the right time? And those sort of issues have to be dealt with prior to takeover, during the takeover, and then post-takeover. So that checklist plan and being available through the PetroCONNECT hub makes us obviously very transparent, and being able to see that track and trace process makes it very transparent to every party that's involved.
The scary thing, Mark, is that, when you're operating a site for the last 20 years or however many years, you find that you've been signing so many personal sureties to all these agreements. And you actually never even remember to cancel all these sureties. And, those are very important things for a seller as well, to make sure that you've gone through all those processes. But obviously, we've got quite a detailed list of all these things that should be followed during takeover.
I think it's all in the details, Sponello, and I think as we bring this process to a close, I mean, from a takeover perspective, it's fundamental that we work together, and working together with the likes of Nedbank as a financier, it's actually setting those status update check-in meetings, us working together all the time, making sure that suspensive conditions have been met. So our legal team working together with Ops Excellence team, working together then with the back office tool team to make sure that have things moved across, and those teams working very, exactly with each other all the time, and us actually attending on the site.
Yeah.
So it's not just a remote dial-in and making sure things are happening remotely.
Sure.
It's actually seeing the person, being there in the flesh, because that's what the service station is all about. And a takeover is very seldom going to be perfect. I think that's one of those sort of moments that one has to make sure that one is aware of. But I think it just being able to pick up the phone and say, what do I do now? This has just happened, and how do I move forward with this? Or do we have a solution maybe because I didn't apply on time, or maybe PetroCONNECT did give the documents and you might have forgotten about it, but maybe there's another solution we can get by until that time is, because there's always challenges in the road.
I think it's also important to note that we are not really replacing the work that the oil company representatives do, but rather we work with them. We complement the work that they do. But look, with all due respect, most of the oil company representatives have never run a site. And so for them to even think that there's even deposits that are sitting and that needs to be transferred, sometimes they may not think of that because there's just certain things that only a dealer would know. And that is why we then plug in those gaps. And so it's not really taking over their work, but there's space for them. And they will work with them, but there's also space for people that have run sites like us that know what could go wrong operationally.
Absolutely. All about complementing each other and trying to lead to as smooth a takeover as possible, leading to a successful buyer at the end of it that doesn't have a very bumpy start to their journey, which in many cases, if that bumpy start is too bumpy, can lead to failure, which is what we try and prevent. And obviously for a seller, many have been put through quite a road up until that takeover, and hence why it is necessary that we do get involved to assist that. But I think it is, as you're saying, it's not to exclude anyone, but rather complement each other and make the process as easy as possible so that everyone can focus on what they should be focusing on. And I think, as we know, from an oil company perspective, the support that they offer the retailer is not all about takeover. It's actually about operation and after takeover rather than during the takeover.
All I can say is that we are ready. Put us to the test and you will have such a peace of mind.